Throughout time, roller coasters have come and gone. Only some become legends for their intensity and thrills. Each and every year, coaster fans like you venture to the parks, searching for that one special ride that stands out above the rest. You submitted your rankings, and now it's time to reveal the group of elite roller coasters that you have voted as the best of the best. COASTER-net Uncut is proud to present the 2020 Thrilling 32.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to round 3 of the Thrilling 32. Danny, we have made it all the way here. Tonight, we reveal the Final Four. We've had some upsets, we've had some surprises, but Danny, I would say on the whole, I think the Final Four was quite pickable. Would you say so?
I mean, generally speaking, I think the first round was very difficult in a lot of matchups, in a lot of spots. The second round, I think quite a bit easier. We talked about that last week, and now getting from the Elite Eight to the Final Four, I think was still easier than that first round. I still think of the first 2 round results and the third round results that we're about to get to here. I think that first round was probably still the most difficult for people. If you survive through that first round, I think you're seeing yourself towards the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, and you can point to Untamed versus I-305 as maybe the one question mark there. We'll see if Untamed moves on here this week. But you would tend to think, that a lot of people probably had a lot of these right. So Danny, I think we should get into it here. This week, we're also going to see the asininity of how Danny Miller sets up brackets as well.
Yes, we're going to see how poorly of a job that I did reformatting these slides, and the inadvertent mistake that I made, which thankfully everyone or mostly everyone noticed, and the people who didn't notice I was able to reach them through email, and we corrected everything, so we're good to go. You will see that 2 rides are magically going to flip-flop places when we get to the Final Four slides next week. So to sort of address that formally here, I've already reformatted the slides for next year, so we will go back to the traditional way.
Oh no!
So this is a one-time deal. It was a mistake. It shouldn't be the way that it was today, or that it was this year. But we're still going to get some pretty good matchups out of it. I don't think the quality of the tournament has decreased at all. And, I still think it's going to be fun. There's still plenty of storylines to talk about in our Final Four matchups, which we're going to find out what they are here in the coming moments, Andy. So shall we jump in to the wood bracket?
Well, in this first matchup here, coming out of the Son of Beast region, when you look at Outlaw Run and Voyage, man, this is one that might give you pause to think, and the reason being is the same reasons that we've talked about throughout this entire series with Outlaw Run, and how high has the resurgence of Outlaw Run gone? How has it happened at all? Is this just something we're making up? Did Time Traveler actually give Outlaw Run a boost? Maybe not felt last year, but maybe it's being felt this year. I don't know, Danny. But Outlaw Run Voyage, 2 former champions here. You would assume Voyage is moving on, but this one has you thinking a little bit maybe.
This is not a done deal. Voyage is by no means guaranteed to move on. Outlaw Run's beaten it before, not in the last couple of years, and we've seen sort of a changing of the guard of the RMCs from Outlaw Run to Lightning Rod the last few years. But Outlaw Run has had that resurgence that you talked about. It dropped down to number 8 a few years ago and has found its way back into the top 5 and is trending upwards. And Voyage, can't really trend upwards. It's been number 1 the last 2 years. So if you're going to pick a ride to beat Voyage, I think Lightning Rod is maybe the first one you go to, but if you're not going to pick Lightning Rod to beat Voyage, Outlaw Run might be your next choice. Maybe Wildfire based on what it did last year, but there's still a lot of volatility with that ride. But I think Outlaw Run is as good a pick as any to beat Voyage.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think if you're looking at rides to unseat the champ, and that's what we're looking for here, Danny Miller. The champs are still here. There has been no
beat
change.
The man, you've got to beat the man.
And seriously, how long have we been saying that? And we've always stuck by, and that's always held true. In this tournament, that to be the man, you got to beat the man. And the two champs still in this. So here is Outlaw Run shot. Will it beat the man?
I don't know. Andy, how many times at Hollywood Nights every year do people come up to us and say, I still like Outlaw Run better than Voyage? How many people do we have tell us that they like Outlaw Run better than Lightning Rod? Quite a lot. I prefer Outlaw Run very slightly to Lightning Rod. It's very close. I rank them next to each other, but I give Outlaw Run just a little bit of the edge. I think it's a more complete ride. What did you end up picking here? I think I know where you went.
Dude, there's only one right answer. It's those people. I respect opinions.
Yep.
And sometimes don't. but when people say that Outlaw Run's a better ride than Voyage, I kind of just continue on my way. Is what I've always traditionally done. Is okay. Yeah. You want to say that? Fine. I'm just going to continue walking. Because there's no debate. To me, there's no real question. I don't know what people are thinking when they say Outlaw Run's better than Voyage. So for me, I pick Voyage, history, and rightness on my side.
All right. Well, let's finally reveal who is moving on to the Final Four, and it is the Voyage from Holiday World. The defending champ is still alive. Moving on to the Final Four, and it will not take on the winner of our next matchup because of the stupid way that I inadvertently...
Well, we might as well just jump to how we actually did this, right? So let's...
yeah, we can do that. Okay, so we're going to jump across now. For the 98% of people who paid attention to the way that I made the bracket that I clearly did not, you'll notice that it's the top two regions and the bottom two regions in the Final Four this year. We'll switch it back next year, I know, but let's jump across now to the Rolling Thunder region. And we have the Coaster from P&E Playland, wearing that glass slipper again, going up against El Toro from Six Flags Great Adventure. And Andy, based on the history and everything, immediately you kind of jump towards El Toro, right? But El Toro was number 4 last year. Coaster was number 6. These rides were not separated by that much. Is there a chance, and Coaster's been to the Final Four before, so is there a chance at all that Coaster could get back to the Final Four in what I think a lot of people would consider an upset?
Well, Danny, I've said it since I made the stupid mistake of picking Phoenix into this route. And I've said I'm the biggest Coaster fan there is. But objectively, I don't know. This is a tough one for me. El Toro is just so loved by the people that love El Toro. It's kind of like, I hate to say this, Danny. I hate to say this because by saying this, I know by saying this I'm offending El Toro fans. Okay,
go right ahead.
I know, but is not the fan base for El Toro much like the fan base for Storm Chaser?
I think so.
I know you think.
I'll say this.
I think El Toro is a far better ride than Storm Chaser ever is.
I'll say this. I would probably take El Toro over Storm Chaser.
Oh, I sure the hell hope so.
I mean, but here's the thing. I've ridden El Toro pretty much every year for the last decade. And as much as I give hate to El Toro in the recent years especially, there was a time where it was a top 5 ride for me. When I was first riding it in the early 2010s, 2010s, 2012, 13, 14 even, it was a top 5, top 10 coaster for me. Now, I've ridden a lot more rides since then. And maybe I've ridden El Toro so much that it's just no longer impressive. We've made this point about Sky Rush too, and Sky Rush opened in 2012. I think it was a legitimate top 5, top 10 coaster. But we didn't have basically any RMC coasters that had that strong, sustained ejector airtime that you get on Sky Rush, and a lot of them have a lot more of it. Iron Rattler. I know you don't like Wicked Cyclone, but Wicked Cyclone, Joker, Steel Vengeance, Twisted Timbers, Untamed. All these new rides that have that type of airtime that didn't 8 years ago when rides like that opened up. And El Toro, I think there's a lot better variety of wood coaster out there now. And I think there's just a lot more interesting wood coasters out there, especially with some of these RMCs. El Toro is not a ride that I have moved down. It's not a ride that I ride it and then I move it down in my rankings. I tend to ride other rides that I put above it, and it just inherently slowly slides down my list. That's how El Toro has slowly slid down my list. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth there. But at the end of the day, El Toro, I think, has lost a little bit with some of the smoothness. I think that sacrificed a little bit of its speed. I think the ending is slightly uninteresting with the turns. I've never been a fan of the ending. And it does sort of meander back into the brake run, which, you and I talk about. That's not something we tend to enjoy. So I don't know. I'm really just trying to justify my opinion of El Toro at this point. But at the end of the day, does it matter when it comes to this matchup against the coaster?
Well, and that's my point, is that the people who love El Toro still love El Toro. Like
Right.
they have not gone away. That you get more hate mail from people complaining about you not giving enough love to El Toro than maybe anything else that you get hate mail for. And there's a lot of things you get hate mail for you. Like, come on, let's be honest here. But those El Toro fans, they just have not backed off on saying, El Toro's missed a step, El Toro's getting rougher. I remember doing the Colossus updates back in the day, and we even suggested that maybe El Toro needed something new, an RMC makeover. And
we got a lot of hate mail and hate comments for even suggesting that.
Yeah, so like, and I know that's a few years ago still. So I just don't think that the people who love El Toro, and honestly, El Toro is still a top 10 wood coaster for me. I just don't ride it enough. I haven't ridden it in half a decade now. So I just don't ride it enough to get, like, and when I rode it, I loved it. No question about it. But just like you, as I've ridden other things, El Toro tends to, get the short end of that stick and move down the list just because of me inserting other things into my list. So I still think El Toro, even though it hurts my standings here, I fully understand what's going to happen here. I still think El Toro moves on.
Well, Andy, for the coaster at P&E Playland, the clock has struck midnight. It is El Toro moving on to the Final Four, and we will see that always highly anticipated matchup of Voyage versus El Toro here in the Final Four next week. Voyage, El Toro, the classic debate of the 2006 debut coasters. How crazy is it that arguably, and in the history of this poll, it's been the case where the top 2 wood coasters in this poll, and historically 2 of the top 4 always were built in the same year.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what. This is a matchup that just keeps popping its head up over time. Here we're seeing it in the Final Four. So this Final Four, this matchup especially, is not an easy one to pick. Most likely.
I think that's a pretty fair statement there. So let's move on now to the Zingo region, the bottom left region there on your sheet of paper that many of you have printed out if you were smart enough to write down your own picks. So we've got Balder from Liseberg in Sweden going up against Gold Striker from California's Great America in Santa Clara, California. Two compact rides, I think you could say. We've got sort of the Intamin plug-and-play in Balder versus the traditional wood Gold Striker from GCI there. Big, fast, directional changes, airtime, tunnels, all that good stuff. This is, I think there's some comparison points between these two. It's a little more difficult to talk about this matchup, though. I'm a huge Gold Striker fan, but we haven't been on Balder, so we can kind of only assume based off of the things we've heard and the history that it has in this poll.
Well, yeah, and it confounds me even more because, I'm not a huge Gold Striker fan. I've never been on Balder. So for me, it makes this matchup, if I had to pick maybe one bracket that just, I don't know, that just didn't have a whole lot going on, it's this bracket. I still don't feel like it's a whole lot going on. That being said, I think it's Gold Striker going over here.
Is that what you picked?
Yeah, I gotta find I'm almost positive I picked Gold Striker. Yeah, I did. I picked Gold Striker.
Well, and if you look at the history here, and I don't know how many people, I think quite a few people did actually have this matchup picked here, but if you look at the history, last year Gold Striker number 9, Balder number 10. I don't know if you realize that.
I did not realize that when I picked it. So. Once again, no research sometimes helps.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You were 1 for 2 last week, right? Based on the research side of things here. Well, moving on to the Final Four out of the Zingo region is Gold Striker from California's Great America. It is Gold Striker. Moving on to the Final Four. And that's one that makes me happy there, Andy, because you know that I'm a huge Gold Striker fan. A top 3 would coaster for me. Top 2, I think, actually, if I look at my most recent rankings there. It's here in my 2 or 3 spot. But very happy to see Gold Striker moving on to the Final Four. And it's going to face an RMC ride in the Final Four. We just don't know which one yet. Perhaps the most difficult matchup of the 4 wood coasters to select was the Mean Streak region here. You've got last year's number 2, Lightning Rod from Dollywood, going up against number 3 from last year, Wildfire from Colmartin. I don't because of the uncertainty surrounding Wildfire, because it is fairly new, it is overseas, the fact that they were right next to each other last year, this to me, and I've said this in each round so far, this to me, if you were picking each of these matchups every round and you got a fresh start, this to me, I think, would be the toughest of the 8 matchups that we're talking about tonight.
Well, what's funny is this is another one that I looked at for a second, and I don't know. It's just something about Wildfire that I just don't believe in. There's just something about it that I've read reviews of it. People say it's a great ride. Some people who have been on the RMCs here just say it's just another it just does all the RMC stuff that you would expect RMCs to do. So yeah, it's cool, but it's not as cool as people are making it out to be. There's just something about Wildfire that I just can't get behind, and I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it.
It's Europe, Andy. Let's be honest. It's
partly that. It's partly that. It's just there's been talks. I've looked at stuff before, and I'm like, oh, maybe Wildfire is a coaster that I might get out to one day, soon. Who knows? But it just doesn't like jump off the page at me. Now, what's funny is this matchup is another ride that I think has grown into maybe one of the most overrated rides. And I don't get me wrong, Danny. I still think that Lightning Rod is a top 5 ride for me. It's a top 5 wood coaster. But
It's a top 10 for me, yep.
But the way people talk about Lightning Rod, I think is completely all wrong. That Lightning Rod, when it does stuff well, it does it amazingly well. The quadruple down, a great element, okay? Has it lost a step? I don't know. I felt like that last summer. I rode it in July. I compared
Well, and it's been fairly well documented, not officially, but it's been fairly well established that there is some difference between that first year when you and I rode it together.
That year that we rode together, that we absolutely deserved that ride. We absolutely.
And you and I came on the show, and you can go back. You and I came on this show. You ranked it number 3. I ranked it number 2. And we both felt it was absolutely deserving of those rankings at that time. And you and I have both agreed, having ridden it several times since then, that it has lost a little something. And most people tend to agree.
Yeah, and it's just I just don't know what it is, and I hate to say it because I love Lightning Rod. That being said, that all being said, I still don't think Lightning Rod should be in the discussion with elite tier roller coasters, wood coasters like Voyage, in my opinion, like Ghost Rider, that does just as amazing stuff as Lightning Rod does. I think Lightning Rod is a one-trick pony. It's the quadruple down. The beginning just does a whole lot of RMC stuff that is good, but I prefer everything on Outlaw Run over Lightning Rod outside the quadruple down. So really, in my mind, it's a one-trick pony, and it's just I don't get the love for Lightning Rod. So you're going to sit there and say, well, how do you pick this then? And the long and short of it is I just went with Lightning Rod.
Because you talked yourself into not picking either of them, so you went with the history.
I did because honestly, like I don't know. I just don't. I feel like Wildfire probably deserves to be here more than Lightning Rod does. I just don't know though.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough, again, not having ridden Wildfire. This is really a tough one to really – I mean, Wildfire looks like the longer ride. It looks like it might actually be the more complete ride of the two. I would say if I hadn't ridden either of these and didn't know anything about either of them, and if I didn't know the opinions of people in the history, I might side with Wildfire because to me it looks like it should be and would be the better ride. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. But there's one spot left in the Final Four, and it belongs to the winner of this matchup. Taking on Gold Striker in the Final Four will be Lightning Rod from Dollywood. So it's an all-United States Final Four. We had opportunities for several wood coasters to come from outside the United States. The Coaster from Canada. We had Balder from Sweden. We had Wildfire from Sweden. None of them making it into the Final Four this year. So we've got Voyage going up against El Toro next week, and we've got Gold Striker going up against Lightning Rod, the 2 winners to face each other for the championship. Andy, your thoughts on the Final Four this year?
I don't think any of that should be all that surprising, to be honest with you.
I don't think so.
That Europe is not really known for their wood coasters, and is that changing maybe with Wildfire and Wicker Man and maybe a renewed sense of, hey, we're gonna build new coasters here. But I just know traditionally when you think of Europe, it's not about wood coasters.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment. I don't disagree with anything that you just said there. Europe is not known for their wood coasters, and they have some excellent ones. They have some very good ones, and we saw a lot of them in the Thrilling 32 this year. But ultimately, the best wood coasters in the world, I don't think are in Europe. I've ridden a lot of them. Haven't ridden all of them. But I've ridden some of the most highly regarded ones over the last several years, and my favorites are still here. I think my entire top 10 wood coaster list, I think, is all U.S. wood coasters. So take my opinion for what you will, but I don't think I'm alone in that category either. So I don't think that this is a big surprise. Now the Steel Final Four could turn out to be quite a different story here in the coming minutes.
Oh, absolutely. The Steel Final Four, there's, and I think when you start speaking of, coasters, I think talking about steel coasters in Europe are a far better discussion than having a wood coaster discussion of stuff of wood coasters in Europe. To me, there's just not a whole lot of interest there.
Yeah. So would you like to move on and find out who our final four steel coasters are this year, Andy? All right. So let's jump into the Skyrider region. We've got Fury 325 from Carowinds going up against Oh, no, Rob Dole. It's Maverick from Cedar Point.
Oh, man.
Maverick. That's right. Maverick from Cedar Point. Advanced last week.
Danny Miller.
That's cold, isn't it? That's
cold.
I shouldn't have done that.
You did, though. You did.
I did. So Fury 325 going up against Maverick. Andy, Twisted Colossus, historically a very strong ride. Top 5, top 6, top 7. Yeah, I'm gonna bring this up. Maverick has been, I think, as high as number 4 in the past. Twisted Colossus, typically, 5, 6, 7, 8, right in that range there. Maverick's pretty darn high this year already, we think. Fury, could it be suffering a little bit of the Outlaw Run effect where Steel Vengeance has sort of stolen its thunder and maybe Fury's going to start to slide just a little bit? Is there potential for an upset here and have Maverick go to the Final Four? What do you think?
Well, I can tell you,
we're setting the stage for this right now. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I can tell you what I picked. I can tell you I picked Fury over Maverick. So
you did have Maverick winning last week.
Wait a minute. What was that question?
You did have Maverick winning last week. So you had Fury versus Maverick in this matchup.
Yes, I did. So okay. I do not make stupid decisions. Like some people that I know.
No, you went there. That was you.
So I indeed picked Maverick over Twisted Colossus correctly, if you will. I also picked Fury over Maverick, despite my
You're pausing quite a bit.
Well, despite my own opinion being to the contrary, that I still think Maverick's a better ride than Fury. I don't think the voters think that, though, and that's the name of this game always, Danny Miller. It's not what Andy Robarczyk thinks. It's what the voters think, and Fury has always been a darling of the voters. Maverick's always been, the rebel on the streets, the forgotten kid, but now. I still think that's true. I picked Fury.
Well, moving on to the Final Four from the Skyrider region is a ride from Cedar Fair.
Oh.
And it is Fury 325 from Carowinds that is moving on to the Final Four. So no Cinderella appearance from Maverick. Does get the benefit of knocking off Twisted Colossus, which in my opinion is very, very good to see. Does not pull off the upset over Fury 325. Fury 325 still alive to take back its crown. So shall we jump over to the flashback region now to get a look at what ride will be going up against Fury 325, and it will either be Steel Vengeance, the defending champion from Cedar Point, or X2 from Six Flags Magic Mountain. We've got the best from each of arguably the two best roller coaster parks in the world by many accounts. X2, fantastic ride, but there's not really a chance that we're going to see an upset here, right?
No, there's. Let me say that I appreciate the run that X2 has had this year.
Yeah, round of applause.
Finally, X2 getting some respect here in the Thrilling 32. X2 has been screwed over on a number of occasions early on in rounds. Yep. And finally here, I think it's moving into this, Elite 8 status, probably exactly where it should be. But to go up against Steel Vengeance, thanks for playing. We'll see you next year, X2.
Well, it is Steel Vengeance moving on to the Final Four. So, we're going to have Fury versus Steel Vengeance. We get a rematch of our championship from last year, a round early this year. How about that?
Well, I tell you what, it makes you think a little bit, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? And
we think a little bit.
Well, and we had some people sort of ask us, because the first couple years we sort of made sure we rigged the regions so that the number 1 and number 2 always went up against each other in the championship. We don't do that anymore. We haven't been doing that for some time. It's worked out that way. But the way that the random list generator has sort of spit out the numbers, it's just always worked out that we've always had it work out that way. So don't think that these couldn't be 1-2 right here because they're playing each other in the Final Four. That's not the case anymore. That hasn't been the case for 4 or 5 years now. Pretty much since we started doing this on YouTube, that hasn't been the case. So it was last year's 1 and 2. I don't know what else there is to say about that, to be quite honest with you.
And I'll be honest with you. I still think Steel Vengeance has the distinctive edge. Nothing has changed in my mind to make me think that Steel Vengeance isn't the greatest roller coaster on the planet Earth. So Fury 325 didn't have what it took last year to beat it. I certainly don't think that the opinion of Steel Vengeance has changed all that much here. So I think the end result's the same. But it does give you time to think, doesn't it?
It does. Well, you've got another week to think about it, and what you think just might happen here, and the ramifications on your brackets that could potentially ensue there. Let's go to the Thunder Looper region now, where we've got the new kid on the block. We've got Untamed from Walibi, Belgium, going up against sort of like the old school traditional favorite, back from the dead almost, Millennium Force from Cedar Point. Millennium Force has never made it to a Final Four in the Thrilling 32 here. If I remember correctly, historically hasn't done that well, but is this a resurgence year for Millennium Force here? Could we see a second Cedar Point and Cedar Point coaster enter the fray here? This one to me is a little bit of a challenge here.
Well, and I'll say this, because for me, picking Untamed into the Final Four was not a challenge, and that's because I got the Smiler question incorrect round 1.
Okay. So you had Smiler in the first round.
So Untamed over Smiler is a no-brainer,
Okay.
But now that you have Untamed and Millennium Force,
it makes you think back to that year that Millennium Force was number 5. And then it makes you think about that combined with the fall that Intimidator 305 had last year down to the bottom part of the top 10. And it makes you think of, well, if the combination of those two is true, there's room in the middle for Untamed to be somewhere in the middle there. And it's a feasible spot for Untamed to end up.
Well, it comes down to how high do you think Untamed went? It's a brand new ride. We know that brand new rides tend to do better year one in this poll. They just do. That's been well documented on this show this year, every year, that we just know that's what happens. So Untamed absolutely has the possibility of it being as high as it possibly could be. All you jabronis went to go ride Untamed this year. So there's that thrown in as well. There's my belief that I love Millennium Force, but I just don't see a massive change in opinion to make Millennium Force be super high in this poll. Yes, it's coming out of a very weak region. That when I look at the route that Millennium Force took to get here, not a
lot of big dogs there.
Not a lot of big dogs here. But I-305 was in this region, and Untamed beat that. Me picking Spyler made this real easy for me. It was Untamed. Looking at this matchup, I still have to think it's Untamed. If anything, I think the opinion has turned against Millennium Force in recent years. I think there's more people poo-pooing that ride than ever before.
Is that the Steel Vengeance effect?
Well, I think there's a lot of effects. I think it's the Steel Vengeance effect. I think it's people coming to their senses and realizing that Maverick is a fine roller coaster. I think it's the Cedar Point effect, where people just hate on Cedar Point stuff, and they can't hate on Steel Vengeance. Anyone with a brain cell can't hate on Steel Vengeance. So who's going to take the brunt of that hate? Probably Millennium Force, right? And that's just been the experience I've seen online and in chats and in random places on Twitter. I just think that Millennium Force is the opinion of most people. It has not gotten better over time, the opinion. And I just don't – I think Untamed, if you look at all the things that we've just talked about, it being a brand new ride, you jabronis going to ride it, Millennium Force, not having a favorable opinion amongst many people, I think it's Untamed here.
Well, advancing out of the Thunder Looper region into the Final Four will be Untamed from Walibi Holland. Untamed moving on to the Final Four, Andy. I'll
tell you what, it's looking good for Orion right now next year.
Well, I did that is very
is running wild, baby.
That is very true. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. How many people saw this one coming here when we unveiled this region?
Well, I did.
Well, you did, but you're smarter than most, Andy.
You are smarter than my bracket. I was hoping a lot of people didn't see it happen.
You are smarter than most, Andy.
When it comes to steel coasters.
Well, so. Oh boy. So here we go, Andy. Moving on to the final region, and so what's going to set itself up here now is we've got Steel Vengeance versus Fury in sort of a United States championship, and the bottom half is sort of going to be our European championship. We've got Untamed from the Netherlands, and we're going to have a winner from sort of our German national championship here in the Super Verbal region. It's Taron from Phantasialand going up against Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park. Again, two rides very close to one another last year. I think number 3, Expedition G-Force, and I think number 4, Taron, if I remember last year's rankings correctly. I talked about Lightning Rod number 2 and Wildfire number 3 last year going up against each other this year. And I said that I thought that was sort of the toughest matchup that we talked about, or that we would talk about tonight. I might have to take that back, because not only were these two rides ranked right next to each other last year, and historically they've been very close to one another, you know that a bunch of people who vote in our poll rode these two rides this year. So you have no idea what the resultant movement of both rides are. They could have both moved up, both moved down. One might have gone up, one might have gone down. They might have crisscrossed. We don't really know. We're going to find out here in just a few moments. What are your thoughts on all of those things sort of playing into this matchup?
Well, all that being said, like you said, the Jabronis riding both of them this year. That's where I got to in this matchup. This is one of those matchups that was really difficult for me to pick. And ultimately, I couldn't come up with any good thoughts to really decipher the two. So I go back to the European epics that you talked about in your 65-part series titled The Exploits of Danny Miller Through Mainland Europe. So,
Thank you.
And generally speaking, you had a good opinion of both of these rides. Okay?
Excellent.
So we know that. Now, you've always said in the past, and you kind of did the math for us maybe last week it was, where if you're not severely ranking a ride down because of the number of rides that you've been on, that your vote by putting it at number 6 or 8 or wherever isn't going to really change the position. Might actually help the position of said roller coaster.
Certainly going to solidify it.
Okay. So that being said, now we move on to where G-Force and Taron neck and neck, but you seem to give the edge to G-Force on your European epic shows. So there's that. Slightest bit. And then there is my belief, though, that I just don't understand Taron. I've tried to understand Taron besides actually writing it. I've watched POVs. I've watched everything. The ride just does not excite me. There's been times that I've watched Expedition G-Force videos and I've been like, I don't know about that. It looks like a bigger Bizarro, might be a little faster, but it's got the good restraints, so there's that. At the end of the day, I had to pick Expedition G-Force based on all of what you said there. All things, because everything you said, basically all things were equal, maybe giving the slightest edge in every category, history, your opinion, to Expedition G-Force. Then throw on top of it, I just don't understand Taron. I don't get why people lose their minds over this ride. It looks slow to me. And they mounted
looks can be deceiving.
But they've mounted the cameras down it closest to the track as you can get. That always makes it go faster. I don't know. Maybe you guys are just sipping too much beer the night before, and that's why you loved it. I don't believe it.
I think, and I hope that you'll get a little bit of that experience this year, or maybe next year, whenever you ride Pantheon, because it does have the same trains. You do sit quite a bit further up than you do on a ride like Maverick or a Fahrenheit or Storm Runner. So even though the speed may not be quite as great, I do think the motion and the directional changes and all that do sort of emphasize or are emphasized and are exaggerated a little bit because you're farther away from the track. You've got further distance to travel through those transitions. I do think those seats factor in to the Taron factor, and I believe that now. I suggested that maybe that's what it was. And again, going back to the Phantasialand show, I believe that even more now, having ridden it now, because the ride is very forceful throughout almost the entire ride.
Yeah.
And Expedition G-Force, same thing. Expedition G-Force is extremely forceful, except for one little portion of the middle part of that ride. There's about a 4 to 5 second section of that ride where you don't quite meander. You sort of do a shallow drop and a turn into a crossover turn. Sort of a catch your breath moment, not a boring moment. Just a less aggressive moment than the rest of the ride. I don't think it's a bad thing. It almost sort of adds a little bit of rhythm and a little bit of pacing to it. I think Taron, you can say the same thing about. But if you consider that a critique, then I had the same critique about both rides. I don't consider it a bad thing. I think it's just something about the way that those two rides run.
And I think at the end of the day, I just have to go with Expedition G-Force here. That's what I did. We'll see if it pays off. But I just don't believe in Taron. I just don't. Just like Wildfire at some level.
Well, all right. Well, coming out of the Super Verbal region, the German National Championship to take on Untamed in the European Championship here on the other side of the Steel Final Four in this year's Thrilling 32 is Expedition G-Force from Holiday Park. Andy, it is Expedition G-Force hanging on and knocking off Taron. We've got Untamed versus Expedition G-Force. Andy, I want to say this. These two matchups in this Final Four, these two semifinal matchups, mirror each other perfectly. We've got Steel Vengeance, which is the new kid on the block, RMC in the United States, going up against Fury 325, the previous sort of the previous champion, previously at the pinnacle, considered by most to be the runaway best steel coaster in the United States by just about everybody up until Steel Vengeance came along. Now, on the other side, we've got Untamed, the new kid on the block, considered by many Europeans to be contending for the best ride in Europe. It was my favorite ride on the trip by a very small margin over Expedition G-Force and Taron, going up against Expedition G-Force, which has been the ride in Europe, the steel coaster, for nearly 2 decades, and pretty much undisputed for nearly 2 decades. Taron got built, 4 or 5 years ago, and people started to question it, but ultimately it was still Expedition G-Force, at least in this poll, that came out a little farther ahead. So the Steel Vengeance Fury matchup and the Untamed Expedition G-Force matchup, in many ways, to me, are sort of the same sort of storyline, just Untamed and G-Force maybe a few years behind that because Untamed is new this year as opposed to last year. But it's sort of the new kid on the block versus the traditional favorite at this point. What are your thoughts?
I think you're absolutely right. This has not become any easier here for people. It's big rides. Your height, and to some extent you got your big ride in Expedition G-Force versus your smaller in height RMC. You got your bigger in height Fury 325 against the slightly smaller RMC. But Fury known for its first drop. Expedition G-Force known for its first drop. Steel Vengeance not really known for its first drop. I don't know. Untamed first drop. Any thoughts?
Steel Vengeance and Untamed have very similar first drops, and they both have the speed bump at the bottom. Fury has an excellent first drop. Expedition G-Force has what I believe is the best first drop in the world on any steel coaster. Especially sitting in that back left seat. Steel Vengeance and Untamed, I would say it's everything after the first drop that makes those rides incredible. I'm going to sort of make 2 statements here. You tell me if you agree or disagree. Agree or disagree, Fury beating Steel Vengeance would be the upset.
Yes.
Agree. That one's clear. So if you agree on that, Untamed Expedition G-Force, at this point in the tournament, which ride would you consider to be the underdog?
I don't think either ride is the underdog. I think they have both equal chances of moving on. For all the reasons we've said up to this point, Untamed being the brand new ride, always new rides do better. Going up against Expedition G-Force that has just recently jumped up, former champ. Is it on its way down? Is it on a slide down? I don't know. So this, I don't think there is a clear favorite in that one. I think like you said, Steel Vengeance, clear favorite. G-Force, Untamed, I think it's a toss a coin.
And there's quite a few people who had the Untamed G-Force matchup picked here. And they had it down to those 2. A lot of people had Expedition G-Force going up against Intimidator 305, for other obvious reasons. but it's anyone's guess as to
Well,
how many
and the
people
thing
are
is,
in the
as much
running.
as I don't believe in Taron, I do believe in Untamed at this point.
Ah, okay.
So you can talk.
Now let me ask you this. I've had nothing but praise pretty much about Untamed, G-Force, and Taron. So what is it about Untamed that sets it apart from Taron?
I think it's based on stuff that I've watched. Taron looks like a ride, or excuse me, Untamed looks like a ride that could be a legit contender for best steel coaster in Europe. And looking at this matchup, Expedition G-Force, I've always had question marks about. Taron, I've had more question marks about. So I think it goes back to that. And Untamed, when you said it's just a slightly smaller version of Steel Vengeance, well, Steel Vengeance is the best ride in the planet. So a slightly smaller version should be pretty damn good.
Well, and you know, that's sort of the assumption we made when we went over and wrote
But
it.
Expedition G-Force seems like a slightly better Bizarro. So to me, that's not breaking any worlds around here, Danny.
Well, Expedition G-Force, I think, is quite a bit better than Bizarro.
And Taron looks like a slightly worse Maverick. So
well, that I don't think is too far off. Taron
but
and
Maverick
Maverick
didn't make it into the Final Four. So why would I believe Taron would? You know, so there's that.
That's very. You're making a lot of good points.
No,
oddly enough, you don't make many of those during the Thrilling 32, but you're making quite a few of them tonight. Boy, oh boy, Fury versus Steel Vengeance, Untamed versus Expedition G-Force in the Steel Final Four, Voyage versus El Toro, and Gold Striker versus Lightning Rod in the Wood Final Four. Andy, final thoughts on the matchups before we take a look at the standings real briefly.
Right there. The two champs are still there, Danny.
They're still there.
And as of right now, I don't think I'm investing any money in new plates.
No,
I don't think that's going to happen. You know, you may want to invest money in a new Kaigamania shirt, though, that are now on sale at the COASTER.net store. So you can be just like me and wear Kaigamania shirts. Get ready for Orion in next year's Thrilling 32. But Danny, it's time for standings. So
all right.
There's not much more to talk about these two Final Fours. There's a lot of things to be decided here, and I'm not quite sure which way it's going to go, but I think I have an idea.
All right. Well, our leader from last week, Michael White, has slidden down into the number 2 position. Had a perfect steel third round, but only had 3 out of 4 in the wood. Lots of people. I'm not going to go through all of them, but lots of people with at least one perfect bracket in this round here. Lots of people having both rounds correct here. Lots of people having both Final Fours correct. So congratulations and a little bit of a round of applause for how many people did. You will see in the standings highlighted in green. Again, look at those standings on thrilling32.com and check your own scorecard. Just make sure that I haven't made mistakes. There has been one person so far in the first 2 rounds that reached out, and I did make an error. So if you think I made a mistake, call me out on it. I did 130 of these. The odds of me getting them all perfect are not that great. Actually 0 because I already messed one up. So call me out if you think there's a scoring error. Sam Weber is our new leader here. 97 points.
COASTER.net.
Yes, 97 points. And then, Andy, we've got a little bit of a cluster. We've got 4 people tied with 95 by virtue of number of picks correct. Michael White is in second. He's also got 52 picks correct, which is the same as Sam, who's the leader. Jeff Goodman and Water Parker, both with 95 points and 51 correct picks.
I may need to leave this tournament.
I think you might have to. Notice we have not gotten to Andy or Barczyk's bracket yet.
No.
And in 5th place is Drew Fisher, who 95 points and 50 picks correct. So Drew doing quite well. Let's see, who else do we have? One Rob Dole still in the running. He had 4 out of 4 in the steel, 3 out of 4 in the wood. So even though he didn't pick Maverick last week, he did get the Final 4 correct. So good on Maverick Rob there. He's sitting there with 90 points, sitting in 12th place currently. So still in it, still an opportunity to win the tournament, I think, here. let's get on down to the impartial Brian Bass. Has made a little bit of a surge here. 4 out of 4 in the wood final 4 and 3 out of 4 in the steel. He's up to 72nd position. Wow, that's all he had to say, huh?
Yeah.
Let's see. Where can we find you then? Let's see. Where are we at? I can't find you. Hold on.
No, I must be winning.
You're in here somewhere. Hold on. What do I don't even know what I have your name in here as. Is it Raptor fan? I don't even
Boss.
know. Oh, there you are. Found you. You had 4 out of 4 in the steel and 3 out of 4 in the wood. Phoenix being your only blemish. You've got 81 points, 45 picks correct. Again, most of those wrong picks taking place in that first round there. You only had 10 out of 16 in the wood. That wood bracket first round was not very kind to you.
Who cares about wood coasters? Like,
well, you're sitting there in 48th place. Let's see. We have the Miller family competition, of course. Everybody's always interested in that. My mom, Becky, hanging strong in there in 11th place, 4 out of 4 in the wood, 3 out of 4 in the steel. Right there, she picked Taron over Expedition G-Force into the Final Four. Not a bad pick. Not a bad pick. And again, the way she picks these, she's not a writer. She goes off of previous history and she looks at pictures on Google Images. That's it. She doesn't do anything else. I believe she told me when she picked this one, because they were ranked right next to each other last year, she looked at photos and videos of Taron, and that ride just looked more interesting. And I will agree with her 100% there. Taron looks like a much more interesting ride with all the theming that's there. So can't really blame her for that. Going down to defending champion Brother Jackson, moving on up to 29th, 4 out of 4 in the wood, 3 out of 4 in the steel. I believe Jackson's blemish is actually Untamed. I think he had selected Intimidator 305 to win that matchup. That's sort of a residual because he had 7 out of 8 in the second round of the steel. So I believe that is just a residual error there. Moving on down, my dad down in 91st place with 73 points, 2 out of 4 in the wood and 3 out of 4 in the steel. And Aunt Sue continuing to climb the ladder here, 111th place with 63 points. No thoughts?
Not a whole lot to think about there.
No thought. Okay. Anyone else that we're interested in finding out where they're sitting here?
Not that I can think of.
I think that's just about it. No bracket from Darkside Dick this year, unfortunately.
No. How about some of those patron people?
Sure. Well, we already said. We already said Jeff Goodman and Water Parker. Who else? Who else is in
Kyle Posey. I don't know what their nom de plumes are though, if they have any.
Let's see.
Mike Flynn, Evan.
Let's see. Hold on. I have to highlight the right page here. Mike Flynn is in 46th position, 82 points. Who else do we have? Kyle Posey, 76th position with 77 points. 3 out of 4 in each of the brackets. Who else did you say there?
Evan Hodert.
Evan, no, he's in here. Evan Hodert, a perfect steel Final Four, but only 2 out of 4 in the wood, sitting in 89th place.
Brian sometimes goes by Gemini fan. I don't know if Gemini.
Oh, yes. Gemini fan is 62nd, 3 out of 4 in the wood, 4 out of 4 in the steel, 79 points. So as you can see, we do not feed the patrons info because some of them
information from us
because some of them are doing quite average. So some of them doing very well. But
what about Brad? Oh, you forgot about Brad. Kansas.
Oh, yes.
I don't know what his nom de plume is there.
Let's see. There's a bunch of Brads here.
Pro.
25th.
Oh.
Brad doing quite well. 87 position or 87 points, 50 correct picks, though. That's good for third best. 3 out of 4 in the wood and 4 out of 4 in the steel. So again, we've got a couple of patrons that are up there in the top 5, top 10, but we have some that are doing quite average or worse. So you can tell that we certainly don't feed. We don't feed all the patrons information anyway. No, we don't feed anybody information here. We partake in fair play. We do not stuff the ballot box, Brian Bass.
No, Brian Bass stuffing the ballot box in the Tournament of Terrible. I saw that.
Line jumpers pulling out a last-second victory.
Yeah, that was suspicious.
Yeah, that was bullshit if there ever was. Anyways, any final thoughts here before we leave folks to lounge in the tears of their busted brackets this evening?
Well, it's going to be a fun time here. That there's still a lot of big question marks out there. With some of these matchups next week, it's going to be a fun time.
It's far from over. It's far from decided.
No, this is still anyone's ball game. Well, not anyone's ball game. I think Crazy Aunt Sue is not her ball game.
Oh, no, that's not nice. Don't do that.
It's not her ball game.
Well, it's no. I'm not saying she's gonna win, but that's still not nice. I will defend Aunt Sue for a minute here. She did tell me that this year when she did her brackets that she drank a very large volume of wine before filling out her brackets this year. She did tell me that. So I will defend Aunt Sue that she may have been very inebriated during the selection process.
I'll be honest. I would have liked to have seen that process because the comments might have been hysterical.
Maybe that's how we have to get her back on the show. Maybe next year for Thrilling 32, she has to drink wine and make her picks live on the air, and we'll turn it into an episode. She's always talking about wanting to come back on.
That would be hysterical.
That would be great.
Oh, we'd have
that would be better than the Raptor Universe bracket of 5 years ago.
And I'll be honest, that we can no longer have COASTER.net Uncut sponsor that because we'll get shut down by every organization out.
Well, we'll get shut down by PETA, perhaps.
Perhaps. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here on the wonderful Thrilling 32. I'm, of course, Andrew Marchak from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, right Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.